This is debate on clauses 5 to 8. Katrina Shanks.
Thank you, Mr Chair. It's my pleasure to take another call tonight and continue this debate on this copyright infringing file sharing amendment bill in the committee stage. Now, as I spoke earlier, I said that this was actually a difficult, and our officials joined us, and I'd just like to acknowledge them for the hard work that they put into this bill and the patience and perseverance they had with some of the committee members in coming to terms with what file sharing was and the displays and the enthusiasm they showed for trying to get us to understand how when you file share, you can get lots of little bits from everybody else's computer, pull it all together, and that's the file that's shared, which takes a bit for someone who wasn't brought up in a generation of file sharing. Even though I was brought up, the first job I had a computer, so I've always worked with computers, but technology changes, and it just shows you how fast you're left behind. And my children would love to hear me say that, because I always say I tell them I know exactly what they're doing all the time, and I'm like Big Brother, and they can't do anything that I don't know about. When in fact, actually, they can do a lot that I don't know about, and what scares me is what I actually don't know. And it's until you have bits of legislation like this in front of you that you actually become aware of how fast technology moves and how fast you can get left behind. And also I talked heavily about, in the first reading, about the ISP warning notices and how the committee had a big debate around that and about whether, you should be able to terminate or suspend someone's ISP, which is your internet provider like Telecom or Extra, if you breach the legislation and you do some file sharing. And I don't think you can accidentally file share. That's the thing. Because if you're going to file share, you actually need to have the file sharing programs. So you can't accidentally go and file share someone's file unless you have got that software on your computer. So to do that, you have to make a decision that this is the system you're going to use to obtain files yourself. So, but what I don't think people understand is actually that it's illegal to file share. And actually what you're doing is you're undermining the musicians and the artists and everybody else, because you're not actually legally paying for the file that you're receiving. And it's interesting how software develops over time as well. And it's so common. And I had no idea that the software was so common. And I was doing a little Google on it on Jonathan's iPad beside me. In fact, that's technology in itself. Because, we had a good talk about the use of wireless locations, especially down in Wellington on the waterfront, how they're going to have a free wireless down there. And, if you've got a laptop down there and you're using their wireless, so you're using 3G down there, for example. Well, 3G is not quite right, but so you're using a wireless down there, you're logged into someone else's system, and if you file share, who's actually liable for that? So technology's changing so fast, and in fact now people joke to me, because I don't have an iPad, I just have a little old laptop that takes about 20 minutes to open now. So when I have my laptop and I'm still waiting to log on, and the guys beside me have got instant emails on their iPads, and they say, what's that old thing you've got there, that old big box? And of course it is a laptop that takes 20 minutes to log on normally, and they've done all their work and gone. So, technology has changed, and it's hard to make legislation that doesn't age fast, legislation that stays current. So that's why I'm a big advocate for principle-based legislation, where you have a principle and technology may change, but the principle actually stays the same about what you're trying to achieve. And it was really interesting when we talked about, the youth and what they're doing, and how we can educate the youth about what they can and can't do with their computers, and what's the most effective way to do that, and what type of campaigns we can run, and actually, how many users are actually aware that what they're doing is right and wrong. And so I think it's really hard to go heavy-handed and to begin with and say we're going to terminate, we're going to suspend, when on a first offence or a second offence, when they've got to learn actually what they can and can't do and what their boundaries are. And so what do you do, like in my situation, and many parents in Ohario, because Ohario's got a very high usage of internet users. I think it's one of the highest in the countries, in the country. Of, what do you do if you're a parent and you've got a child who's file sharing and you're like me, you're not quite aware, Mr. Chair?
Katrina Shanks.
Are you not quite aware what file sharing is? And all of a sudden you're suspended. It's like, well, that's really good. And the second time, so you go and talk to your children and you try and educate them, and the second time, like they do, they try and sneak something past you a second time. No, I'm not even going to say what that member said to me about if they do it a second time. So if they do it a second time, and once again, you go in and you say, you can't do this, we're going to lose our ISP. And the third time you've lost your ISP, and so the whole house is affected. And so, there's a line and a balance about what's right and what's wrong, and where you can come in and say, well, actually, now we're going to suspend you. So it's going to be interesting because we're going to watch this really closely. We're going to watch it, and the stakeholders are going to watch it. MED are going to work on it and watch it over a period of time, just to see if we can get some change in there, just through education and through issuing notices. So it'll be really interesting to watch. My colleague talked about a survey that was done, and I just want to talk to you about some of the stats in that survey, which is interesting when you talk about a survey. This was done by Telstra Clear. There were 1,048 Kiwi internet users aged between 18 and 17, like Jonathan was saying. And it's interesting because when you're talking about such a wide range of people, you wonder what type of software they have on their computers and what they're aware of and what they're not aware of. Because I know that for my father-in-law, for example, they're very computer aware, but I also know that the siblings come in and they fiddle around with it and they load software on and they put their own little fixes on it when it falls over, and I'm sure they're not always sure about, what they've got on their computer in terms of software. So, and I think the same thing happens even for my generation. My son tries and does fixes on my computers, not my work computers, Parliamentary Services will be pleased to know, but my own home personal computer. And he comes along and he tries to do fixes and goes through a back door, which always I assume you have to take screws off and undo the back of it, but obviously you don't. It's like an IT backdoor thing that he talks about, which I've got no idea. So really, when you're talking about, it's hard to know. It's hard to know what type of software is on your computer at the end of the day. So when you look at the survey and you see the results of the survey, it's even more interesting. 46% of the households interviewed had peer-to-peer file sharing software on their computer. And I thought that was huge, 46% of the households. I couldn't even imagine, people knowing, that many people knowing what peer-to-peer sharing actually was. 48% believed that the prospect of being caught by police and fined was the most effective legal tool in trying to defer copyright infringers. That's pretty harsh, I would have thought, but interesting that they thought that. The disconnection of broadband for repeat offenders was thought effective by 43%, and I would think that's where most people would be. More than 50% neither measure was significant enough to stop illegal downloading. Music was the most copied content, 82%, followed by software at 49%, movies at 35%, and games at 31%. And they thought content copying was widespread, and most claimed to do it only occasionally. 32% claimed to copy music more than once a month, while 23% used iTunes, a legal online source. So it's interesting to see the type of stats that we're talking about when they survey internet users, and actually how aware they are of actually what they are doing or what they're not doing and what's around them. So, Mr. Chair, I think that this legislation is a good step in the right direction. I think we've got a compromise. I think the committee worked hard. And I think it's important that we have principle-based legislation so it can move with the times and it's not caught up, because this is certainly a very fast-moving environment that we're in, and nobody knows what's around the corner. So I think this is a good step in the right direction. I think if it's monitored closely and ensure that it's working and effective, then it will stay in place for a period of time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Call Claire Curran.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'd like to take a call as one of a number, I hope, in the committee stage of this bill. There are so many things to talk about. So I'm going to start with trying to get, as I see it, to the heart of the issue for